I'm really excited to be here. So I guess we can jump right into it. As you can see, we're going to be exploring the art of storytelling today, but we're going to be exploring it from multiple mediums, so not just words. We'll be looking at a piece of art, we'll be looking at or listening to a piece of music, and also looking at a few poems and sort of exploring what the elements of storytelling are that can help us understand these different art mediums. So I'm going to try and free myself here. Okay. Yes, this is basically what I just said, but we're going to start with a work of visual art. The goal here is that we're going to really experience these different forms of storytelling. And a lecture is probably a little bit of a misnomer for what we're going to do today, because I'm not going to be doing a lot of the talking. It'll be up to you guys to kind of, fill in some of the experiences that we're having. But don't be afraid. I'm trained to do this, so you'll never be short of things to think about here. So the facilitated discussions that we're going to be engaging in is through a method called Visual Thinking Strategies, VTS. And there's 3 questions. The first one will be, what do you see going on in this work, or hear, or read, depending on the medium. The second question will be, what do you see, or hear, or read that makes you say that? And then the third question will kind of open it up for other responses, which is, what more can we find? So there are no wrong answers to these questions. There's no pressure to respond if you don't want to, but you're more than welcome to share your experience with us, because the goal here is that we get to enrich our understanding of these works, not only through our own experience, but also by hearing about the experiences of others and learning about what other people are seeing and hearing and reading that may be different than what we noticed. So it's going to be a fun night, lots of different artworks, and we can get started. So what I'm going to do, I'll switch the slide here. You'll see the first artwork. We're going to have a moment of quiet just to look at it, and then we'll move into the first discussion and with the question of what do you see going on here. Okay, so this is the first artwork. Okay, so what do you see going on in this image?
I think it looks like she's trying to balance using that pole.
Okay, so you're noticing how her posture, and it looks like she's balancing on this pole. What do you see that makes you say that she might be balancing?
Because that pole that she's holding, it could be used as like a balancing tool.
Okay, so you're noticing the beam that she has on her shoulders?
Yeah, but you can't see the ends of it off the screen. I'm imagining it ends, but that other pole goes farther.
Okay, so you're sort of extrapolating even past the edges of the frame here to think that maybe she's balancing on this pole.
And walking across
okay.
Like a distance where she has to balance on that.
Okay, so she's moving across sort of a space where she has to balance on top of this pole.
And time isn't on her side.
And so you're noticing that time is not on her side. What do you see that makes you say that there's time in this image?
Is that a clock?
You see this?
Yeah.
Yes, it is a little bit hard to see, but there's a little...
It's weighting her down a little bit. She has to balance against time.
Okay, so you're noticing that there's a clock and it's kind of weighing her down on one side? And so that's
I'm not necessarily weighing her down, but
it's part of the balance.
It's against her, yeah.
Okay, so she has to kind of... That's contributing to the sense that she's balancing in this image?
And all the pieces of her fabric are all equally cut, about the same size.
Okay, so you're noticing the
That's for
this panel of fabric? Okay. What more can we find? Yes?
The skirt itself is very traditional, of some sort of African tribe, but also the contrast with the white wife beater, probably by like hangings or those typical American companies, and just like that fashion contrast, especially the contrast with the red and the black. Everything's just very clean cut. There's just a lot going on about different cultures clashing and contrasting as well as the background.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of all the different, like contrasting elements here, not only with the different fabric and style choices with sort of the wife beater and the skirt with the traditional pattern. And sort of like, I think you mentioned also sort of like down home kind of clothes, like not, or like American.
Oh, no,
American
no,
kind of
just
clothes.
like literally like the white, like the white tank top. is Probably just like some generic shirt you could get anywhere, but that tribal skirt is very traditional. So it's a little bit of contrast between Western and
I see.
non-Western.
Okay, so like the cultural contrast between the two. Yeah, and then you're also noticing, I heard sort of the compositional contrast with the colors, the really bright red, sort of the stark black lines, and then the bright white of the shirt. Yeah. Thank you. What more can we find?
Online, we have the swinging heart clock also indicates movement.
Okay, because it looks like it's swinging off to the side. Okay, thank you. Yes, what more can we find?
The way that the skirt is drawn, you can't really tell for sure if there's actual beam under her feet. It almost looks like she could be floating in air or standing in front of the beam. It's hard to say whether or not she's on the beam or not based on the occlusion of the line by the dress.
Okay, so you're noticing that maybe there's almost a sense of ungroundedness, maybe, by not being able to actually see her feet on the beam on the bottom, which is hidden by her skirt. Okay, thank you. What more can we find?
Another comment online was, I wonder how the necklace got around the rail in the first place and if she wants to remove it from around the rail.
Okay, so since this interaction is a little difficult to do, I'm going to kind of fill in the gap here, but maybe this person is noticing that the necklace is wrapped around the beam. It's not like in front of or behind. And so that person's wondering how it got on there, since we can't really see the end of the beam. And yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, what more can we find?
I think hearts kind of always symbolize some sort of love, whether it's the weight of love, the time commitment is tough to balance, or something like that. But the heart is a heart for a reason. I'm just not exactly sure what that is.
Okay, but it sounds like you're picking up on some narrative here, which is that the heart sort of symbolizes certain things, and love is a big one. And the fact that there's a clock in there is making you think that maybe the time that it takes to be involved, or to love someone, or to be a loving person, might be part of the weight that she's feeling, and that maybe there's some backstory to this particular object. Okay, thank you. What more can we find? Yes.
The color red is usually, it can be a sign of aggression, it can be a sign of love, but it's definitely evokes a certain emotion.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of the very strong emotional content of the background here, and how that sort of contributes to our sense of maybe the character of the image with strong emotion of some sort, whether it's anger or love, but definitely on the passionate end of the emotional spectrum. Thank you. Any other thoughts or observations?
Just that the background color to me looks more Latin American than anything else.
Okay, and what do you see that makes you say that?
It's just a shade that is in my kitchen, thanks to my wife's taste. Latin American thing.
So you're drawing on personal experience to connect
Yes,
this
yeah.
image with maybe a cultural ties along the lines of the skirt?
It could be, yeah. I'm wondering, is it possible to turn off some of these lights? Because it's hard to see detail.
Yeah, are her eyes open or
Much
what are
better,
her eyes?
thank you.
I can't see from here what her eyes are.
They are open, yes.
And looking down kind of, or straight ahead?
Well,
From here,
I
can't
think
tell.
straight ahead, but
Yeah.
because I'm looking at it from sideways, so I don't have a good perspective on that either.
From here, it looks like they're closed. and
Yeah, almost.
It's a lot harder to stay balanced if your eyes are closed, I think. than
Okay, yes, you're noticing how the character's eyes, whether they're open or closed, sort of contribute to the sense of precariousness of the figure.
Now that the lights are out, I think I can see the arm and hand on that side seems much more distressed than it did a minute ago.
On this side or this side?
That side, yeah. Like it's struggling more than I realized.
Okay, and what do you see that makes you say that it's struggling?
There's some shading behind it that I would say like would be indicative of movement or strain. I think that's what it's trying to convey.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of the color variations around this arm, giving a sense of movement or maybe some tenseness?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. What more can we find? Now that we can see it better.
The vertical stripes in the background make the sense of scale difficult. They look like wallpaper stripes, and then that makes her look small in scale.
Okay, so the Zoom participant is noticing the stripes in the background and sort of how it messes with perspective and sense of scale. Maybe a home-like quality with the wallpaper, but a little bit alarming in the sense that that would mean that she's very small in the face of this type of wallpaper. Okay.
Getting back to this gentleman, looks like almost she's supporting the entire beam with one arm, and the other arm is just kind of helping balance the clock and the necklace.
Okay, so you're in agreement that it seems like this side of her body is doing a lot more work.
It looks like she's holding the beam up with.
And maybe she is trying to get the necklace off.
Yeah, she's starting to slide it off, or
Okay, so you're noticing sort of the tension and the relationship between the two sides of her body and the different things that her hands are doing. So we're getting some action into this narrative of trying to maintain whatever work is being done on this side with sort of the weight or the clock that we've done over here. Okay.
The stripes in the background definitely make the contrast of the pipe that is tilted, and it definitely, it's the only thing that's tilted now. There's stripes in the back, the stripe on the bottom is they're all straight. And so it just makes the contrast of that one tilted pipe on the top strong.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of maybe the role that these stripes have, in addition to giving us some sense of scale or character, are also contributing to the sense of sort of off-kilterness in the top beam,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of movement and action there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. What more can we find?
Like it's like a woman struggling to, to maintain balance, maintain her, like it's like a race against time and the people she cares about to maintain this balance.
Okay, so
Which is
you're
what you going on.
oh,
Oh, sorry,
one
go
second,
ahead.
Yes,
Didn't mean-
I just want to
Sure.
paraphrase this. So you're noticing that there's a sense of struggle here, and sort of like the character's inner, or this figure's sort of like inner emotional state maybe is coming out in what you're seeing. What do you see that makes you say struggle? And it's okay if we've covered some of it and you want to repeat it.
Just the, I guess, the struggling arm, the clutching on, or I guess the hanging on to time and love, having to stand on something that's, it's stable, but I don't know if she can move anywhere else on it. I don't know how free she is to actually move on it. And then she's struggling to lift it.
Okay, so all these sort of different elements working together to give us that sense of the her inner state there of struggle. Thank you. Yes, that.
Well, now that I see it more clearly, to me, it almost looks like she's hanging on it more than pulling it up, and seems quite comfortable.
Okay, and what do you see that makes you say that she's
Well,
comfortable?
Her off-kilter from the hips and this arm could be just, comfortably hanging out.
Okay, so you're not necessarily getting that same sense of struggle, but more a sense of sort of balance, like she's comfortable?
It looks casual to me.
Okay, casual. Thank you. Yes, what more can we find?
I mean, when I first saw it, like in the first couple of seconds, I assumed that because we couldn't see off screen or off the edges, that there was something that she was actually carrying. on the edges of this beam, and that her job is to actually transport it somewhere while balancing on this other beam, hence the name equilibrium being difficult if you've got weight. If you've got a lot of weight you have to carry on your shoulders. That's kind of, and then I stopped thinking that after the discussion for some reason.
Okay, so you're noticing a couple of things. One, you're noticing the connection of the title to your initial sort of guess that she was carrying something that you couldn't see off the edges of the frame.
Buckets of water or something.
Yeah, okay. But that has changed over the course of the conversation. Can you tell us a little bit more about?
Largely because of what she's holding in her hand and not holding the beam with both hands. That would be a little difficult to pull off. And then the fact that it's off center sort of suggests the artist isn't trying to convey someone carrying two equal loads.
Okay,
But something else.
so you're also kind of noticing her posture and how it doesn't seem like she's necessarily carrying something because this hand is relaxed.
No, more that she's off center in this frame.
I see. Okay, so her position in the frame is helping with that. Okay, thank you.
I think instead of actually looking relaxed, she could be looking like she's getting ready, carrying her log for her own crucifixion.
Okay, so you're noticing that her posture may be suggestive of heading towards.
Jesus Christ carrying the cross or something.
Okay, a Christ-like figure. And what do you see that makes you say that it's a crucifixion or a Jesus Christ?
Just being the opposite of what somebody else
Oh,
said.
okay.
Well, and it just kind of reminded me of that.
She looks kind
Like
of
the
sad.
strain in her face, like
Okay.
she's running out of time and she's going to
Tired.
her own
She looks
crucifixion
tired.
or something.
Okay, so you're noticing her, sort of the emotional expression of her face, and what she's carrying sort of suggests
Yeah,
maybe
it's swinging back behind her.
a load. Okay, thank you. Yes,
So the side of the beam, so you have the beam on behind your shoulders. The side of the beam with the heart is dipping lower than the other side, so it could indicate that the heart is heavier than not, or she's carrying some kind of burden in her heart, potentially, because of just looks like it's heavier on that side, because it's pointed down versus the other side.
Okay, so you're noticing how the sort of the composition and the angle of the beam and where the heart is that, to you, that's suggesting some kind of emotional quality
Potentially.
to what
yeah.
she's bearing. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Just to add to that, I think, if she were to let go of the heart and the clock, it would level out, but she's not willing to let go of it and grab the beam. She's holding on to that and is willing to struggle in order to hold on to it.
Okay, so again, we're sort of getting the inner state of she's wanting to hold on, she's choosing to hold on to something that is heavy and sort of throwing things off kilter by weighing down this beam. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so we got a lot of storytelling elements in here, a lot of character development just through this still image. So I'm going to hop over to the next slide, which is a little bio about the artist who created this painting. You can look at that. I'm going to get set up for the next segment, so ignore me. You can enjoy the slide. Has everybody had a chance to look at this as much as they want? Okay, so we're going to move on to the musical segment here. And I put the score up here for people to look at. Don't feel like you have to know what's going on up there. If you don't read music, that's totally okay. It's just another element of sort of the storytelling aspect of music. So you may be surprised by what sorts of things you're able to connect to what you see up here. If you want to just close your eyes and listen to the music because it's distracting, that is totally okay. And also, don't feel like your comments have to be tied to what you see up there. It's just another element. So I'm going to jump in and play this piece for you, and then we'll have a similar discussion. Trying to stay by the mic stand here so I can keep Buell in hand. So what did you hear going on in this piece? Yes?
Somebody think of some very melancholy memories, and then the part where you switch from the fourth to the first string, you know, rocking the bow, we call it that, from the fourth to the first string. Something interrupting his melancholy memories with a frightening memory that he or she is trying to overlook or forget.
Okay, so you're hearing some emotional stuff here. There's sort of a fond memory, maybe.
And then, yeah, interrupted by that.
By the big chords, yeah.
Sweeping of the bow across
Okay.
the strings.
Is the part that you're thinking of the fond memory? Is it this part? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're noticing a contrast in the character then. We've got this sort of sweeter, fonder section interrupted by
that.
the big chords.
From the fourth or first string.
Okay.
Something that's disturbing to the thinker.
Okay. And what do you hear that makes you say that it might be disturbing?
like somebody raising their voice inside the mic,
Okay,
somebody almost scolding themselves or about something in the past.
okay, so you're hearing the change in volume as indicative of.
And forcefulness.
And forcefulness, okay, so the energy and the volume of those chords
Yeah.
really provides that contrast. that
And
you're
you
noticing.
play it so well, I mean, it's easy to discern.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I have practiced hard to be able to play dynamics. Not always easy. Yes,
If we
well,
could try to pass it on the microphone, just so it's a little easier for everybody to hear, that would be great.
Yeah, I was gonna say the dynamics. There's piano and forte and crescendos and diminuendos and everything, almost every line. And so it just has a lot of ebbs and flows and things changing throughout the entire thing as far as the volume goes. And it leads you down a path that kind of brings you along the story with just the volume alone. And then you incorporate the notes they seem some kind of minor and things like that would give a darker tone, more ominous tone towards the end and in the middle. So, yeah, I think that's super interesting.
okay, so you're noticing a few things, and for those of you who may not read music, he referenced you see the FF and the MM, and then there's some P's in there, PP and F, and those are what are called dynamics, which describe sort of the changes in volume that happen throughout the course of a piece. And you're saying that those sort of provide some of that sense of like turbulent quality in the music. And you also mentioned the minor, more ominous character. So again, for those of you who may not know quite what that means, we have two major, well, major is not the right word here to use here. We have two important sort of key options for music. We've got the major mode and the minor mode. The major mode, well, the minor mode is what we hear at the beginning of this piece. Very dark, sort of sad sounding. The major mode, if I change one note in this chord, you'll hear the difference here. Okay, so that's where the difference comes in. And so when you're talking about the sort of more ominous minor sound, that is very prevalent in the piece and contributes to that character that you're noticing. So, thank you. What more can we hear? Yes. Oh,
Ozzy?
Yes, so this song and our piece you selected before in, I guess, reference to your storytelling point of today, is that both of these pieces, whatever is going on, even if I don't know what's going on, it's clear that something is going on. There's an opposite, there's contrast, there's dynamic, and yeah, and in that way it's engaging and I want to listen more, look more, or whatever. So just 2 points going back to your main topic of storytelling.
yeah. So you're noticing how you're drawn in by these works, even if there isn't like a concrete narrative that is explicitly being made.
Right, like there's still some sort of like formula or like template for storytelling, even if all the details of the template aren't that hashed out or known.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit about some of the details you're hearing in this one?
Well, going back to the contrast that the two gentlemen were speaking about, like even, I don't know music, I don't know what I'm listening to, but I do know that there was a fluctuation of energy and volume and like something was being told with sentiment, going back to the contrast of soft and fond and then more dramatic and intense. So.
Okay, so you're maybe noticing sort of the structural elements here
Yeah.
that contribute to that sense of narrative with, a more intense section and then a gentler, fonder section and then the more intense section coming back.
Yeah, yes, yeah, even if I don't know what it is, there's still the dynamic. There's still something being told or evoked, I guess is my point.
Okay.
Dynamic.
Fantastic. Thank you. What more can we hear? I know Thad is just wanting to point out all the inaccuracies of my interpretation.
Although that one F,
I
just a
know.
little higher. Well, right from the start, you have this rhythmic motif of short, long, which I know is characteristic of a saraband. and he certainly makes ample use of that. It kind of ties it all together.
Okay, so you're noticing how sort of the rhythmic structure of the piece sort of creates this sense of continuity throughout?
Yeah. Also struck it, being reminded of his dates, it's pretty, strikes me as a kind of, a piece that looks very much backwards at older musical traditions.
Yeah, so you're noticing sort of this, a sound that maybe was more common in previous centuries,
Yeah.
even with where this guy lived. What, could you be more specific? What did you hear that makes you say that?
Well, it's mostly diatonic, it's mostly in the key that it's in, there's nothing too, doesn't make a lot of use of dissonance or sharp harmonies. Melodically, it's very singable, and even with the first chords, the setting that minor key so boldly, it's like something that Bach might have done.
Okay, so you're noticing a few musical elements here that sort of tag it as a throwback for you, which is one, sort of the melodic quality, the fact that there is a very clear sense of singable line. And you also mentioned the diatonicism, so not a lot of, you'll notice some symbols here. Let me see if I can. So you'll notice some symbols here. We've got like markings that show up, and these are called accidentals, and they basically show us notes that put us out of our key signature here. So what that's talking about by diatonicism is that there aren't that many of those, and the ones that we do have, they just show up because we're in a minor key and they have to, and that's complicated, and I won't get into that. But basically, what that's saying is that where the piece is in the key, like the first chord that I played for you, all of the notes that follow are very much in that sort of centered tonal area. And they don't get weird, like sometimes composers do.
And a voice whispered in my ear that the ornamentation is also a strong indication that he's looking back to older styles.
Okay, I think I know whose voice that was that whispered that at you. And by ornamentation, we're referring to things like, I should just keep this out now. Here, this little trill, I can demonstrate that for you. So the measure 27, you'll see there 2 bars before B. If I don't have any ornamentation, it sounds like this. With the ornamentation, which we've got a TR above the note for trill, and then we've got those 2 little tiny notes, which, is that an Aufschlag? Yes, that's an Aufschlag, okay. Sometimes my vocabulary is also not good. But with those 2 things added, the measures sound like this. So it gives us a little bit of extra fancy sense of arrival there. So yes, okay, so all those elements, melody, diatonicism, ornamentation, and just sort of the grand entrance of the piece suggest an older time. Yes, what more can we hear? Oh, his name is Carl Bohm. He lived from 1844 to 1920.
Was he an emotional fellow?
Well, I don't know him personally, so I can't really say, but
Bipolar?
he was living in what's called the Romantic time period, so kind of bridging the gap between late Romanticism and post-Romanticism. So, yeah, there was high emotion there. Yes, what more can we hear?
So, before you even started playing, I couldn't help noticing that it says transcribed by someone.
Barbara Barber.
Barbara Barber, the unlikely name of. And I was just wondering what the original orchestration was, or the original instruments that the piece was written for, which preceded the viola treatment you played for us.
I believe the violin, because the violin version does not have transcribed by it. So I think violin, and I'm not sure if it was for orchestra or piano or some other chamber ensemble, but these versions have piano accompaniment with them.
started thinking about it more, and with the transitions of dynamics to it being loud and soft, almost in that pattern, loud and soft, loud and soft, I imagine this is either two people having a conversation. One is more strong-willed and louder, and one is a little bit more reserved. Or possibly some inward thinking where you're not sure about something, and then you come back and you say, well, but I am sure about this, and just some wavering within yourself. So either way, I think it kind of represents one of those two things for me.
Okay, so you're hearing almost a conversational aspect in this music between either two different people or, you know, two different sides of your own inner psyche kind of thing. And you were noticing especially the dynamics sort of creating these two characters, like a louder, more voluminous one, and then a softer, sort of the piano dynamic aspect. And you were noticing also how rapidly they changed from one to the next, is that?
Yeah, it seems like every line, sometimes it's going from loud to soft, and so that would be conversational to me. Let one person go, then the next speaks, and that's kind of how I saw it.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we have time for one or two more? Anybody else heard some things? Yes?
So to me, it sounded binary, off on, like the on, off and on of the light switch. Kind of creates a kind of a sense of, I don't want to say panic, but it's kind of an unease a little bit, and I think it's that element that kind of also grabs you by the neck and you're kind of like makes you pay attention. So that's one of the things I noticed.
Okay, so you're also noticing sort of the high contrast, and for you it's almost like a binary, like off-on, very clear-cut sense of distinction between the two sort of ends of the spectrum. Yeah, okay. What did you hear that sort of contributed to that sense of contrast?
So it's the back and the forth. It's the, and see, here's where my lack of official vocabulary fails me.
That's okay.
It's the, yeah, I don't know. without just like the, I guess I can't really find the words to, but I know what it sounds like.
Okay. Was there a specific part of the piece? Are you thinking of again like dynamics, the volume that you were hearing, or was it the notes themselves?
It's more the melody.
The melody. Okay, so you're hearing contrast in the melody
Yeah.
as much as any other element. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Any last thoughts? Okay, so here again, obviously this is a very different artistic experience than to look at a painting, but we were still able to pick up on elements of a narrative. And here we're hearing a lot of sort of contrast over time, both in volume, in melodic structure, and getting that sense of narrative through the contrasting elements of the music. So, okay, I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to pop up the bio. This one's a little bit shorter because not much is known about this guy. But you can look at that while I get set up for the last bit. You music nerds out there might be amused to learn that this man's music funded Brahms. All right, is everybody ready to move on to the next slide? Okay, so the next section is going to be poetry, and the reason that I wanted to do poetry, obviously there are many types of narrative that we're familiar with in writing, but poetry in particular I think combines a lot of the components that we've actually explored in visual art and music. So I think this will be kind of a fun way to tie in previous discussions to, to this other sort of obscure art form that we are maybe less familiar with of poetry. So I'm going to read this out loud from the book that I have, and then we'll do a similar type of discussion and see what we can learn about this poem. Becoming a horse. It was dragging my hands along its belly, loosing the bit and wiping the spit from its mouth made me a snatch of grass in the thing's maw, a fly tasting his ear. It was touching my nose to his, made me know the clover's bloom. My wet eye to his made me know the long field's secrets. But it was putting my heart to the horses that made me know the sorrow of horses, the sorrow of a brook creasing a field, the maggot turning in its corpse, made me forsake my thumbs for the sheen of unshod hooves, and in this way drop my torches, and in this way drop my knives. Feel the small song in my chest swell, and my coat glisten and twitch, and my face grow long, and these words cast off at last for the slow, honest tongue of horses. Would anybody like a second reading of that before we dive into the conversation?
Who wrote it?
His name is Roggow. You want another reading? Okay. Becoming a horse. It was dragging my hands along its belly, loosing the bit and wiping the spit from its mouth made me a snatch of grass in the thing's maw, a fly tasting its ear. It was touching my nose to his, made me know the clover's bloom. My wet eye to his, made me know the long field's secrets. But it was putting my heart to the horses that made me know the sorrow of horses, the sorrow of a brook creasing a field, the maggot turning in its corpse, made me forsake my thumbs for the sheen of unshod hooves, and in this way dropped my torches, and in this way dropped my knives. Feel the small song in my chest swell, and my coat glisten and twitch, and my face grow long, and these words cast off at last for the slow, honest tongue of horses. Okay, so what do we hear going on in this poem? Yes.
Well, it almost sounds like the author is trying to identify with the plight of the horse and is using tactile and visual stimuli to try to almost transform himself into a horse.
Okay, so you're hearing how the speaker is trying to, is so identified with the horse emotionally that he's turning into one himself, or trying to. You said there was a lot of tactile sort of things. Can you, what do you read specifically that suggests to you tactile?
The wet eye, the clover's bloom.
Okay, so you're sort of physical sensation.
Tasting,
Okay.
fly tasting its ear.
Yes, fly tasting his ear, not car. Just kind of looked at that. Sorry, my scanner was not too successful. So it's still
A lot of the senses
okay.
in the
So sight. We've got sight with the eyes. We've got taste with the fly on the ear. Sort of visual with the clover blooming. Okay, thank you. What more can we find? What's going on in this poem?
We have a comment of transformation from Zoom.
Okay, so the Zoom attender is noticing the sense of transformation, maybe similar to what David was suggesting with the speaker sort of turning into a horse. Okay, yes, what more can we find?
Yeah, so the author obviously left certain beginnings sure if that is to give the reader a second to picture what it's talking about, or if it's to emphasize either the beginning of the line or the beginning of the sentence and giving it a break, but you can definitely see that that is on purpose, and just gives you breaths in places that you wouldn't typically take a breath.
Okay, so you're noticing how the structure of the poem and the line breaks in particular sort of interacts with the punctuation and sort of creates a sort of unexpected rhythmic element in the poem. Is that
Yeah,
kind of what
correct.
you're saying? Okay. Yeah, and by placing these parts of the sentences at the ends of lines, you're noticing how intentional that is and how it creates this sort of pacing. Okay, thank you. Yes, what more can we find?
Not only does he seem to be embracing his hoarseness, he's rejecting his humanity. Dropping his torches, dropping his knives, casting off even his language.
Okay, so you're noticing that the transformation extends not to just becoming a horse, but to in fact leaving behind all humanity. And you're especially noticing the torches and the knives and the language.
Yeah, it seems, what am I trying to say, that he's rejecting what he's been.
Okay, and what do you see that makes you say, or what do you read that makes you say that he's rejecting it?
Well, the slow, honest tongue of horses suggests that maybe his words are not, or have not been as honest as he would like.
Okay, so you're noticing the speaker really being positive in a way that suggests that maybe human language is lacking something that horse language possesses?
Yeah, it strikes me as he admires the horse, and the flip side of that is he's unhappy with his own race.
Okay, so you're maybe even noticing like the turn that happens then. We have all this first section about the horse and the horse's qualities, very tactile as David mentioned. And then you're noticing the turn where there's sort of an active rejection of certain human tools.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What more can we find?
The knife suggests that he's becoming more moral. He's not going to kill.
Okay, so you're noticing that this particular tool that he's rejecting, the knives, carries with it a sort of an intimation of violence, and that he's turning away from that.
Ethics, morals, killing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, what more can we find?
Okay, so going off of that a little bit, thank you. So going off of that, I see this as a much more, obviously metaphorical transformation. And what really kind of drew my attention was the phrase, the maggot turning in its corpse, because it's, for me, very tonally different than the rest of it. And what I'm taking from this is the kind of narrator is going through a period of transformation, and there's pain in that. And it's kind of more wishing of, oh, I'd rather just be a horse because I'm already having to do or having to go through this change that is painful to me. And for me at least, the slow, honest tongue of horses, I think, means that the narrator thinks they'll be better off at the end. But still, there's a lot of pain and almost disgust at having to go through it.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of contrasting images here with the maggot turning in its corpse, which is suggestive of pain and some kind of loss. And then, that contrasting with the slow, honest tongue of horses at the end, sort of indicative of this movement through pain into something better. Okay, thank you. Yes, well, what can we find?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on. So there's repetition. He uses made me, I would say like what, 4 or 5 times. So yeah, made me, made me, made me, made me. So he's doing that for a reason. I think it's to kind of ingrain the idea that he's kind of going outside of himself. And I think people have already kind of discussed not just becoming a horse, but kind of disarming himself from being a human. I think that repetition helps with that. But there's also some personification there when it goes from the mouth made me a snatch of grass and the thing's mom. A snatch of grass isn't alive, but he's kind of giving it his own personal life. So I think that's to kind of engage in the idea that he's going beyond just a human form. Yeah, and then it's the active verbs are really a good way to show, well, action obviously, but it's more of a idea that it's an idea that he's moving past, and having the active verbs really helps kind of place your mind in the action of what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So you're noticing, I heard a couple things there. One, repetition, particularly of the phrase made me, which we see appearing at different places in the line each time. That contributes to the sense of rhythmic impetus that leads us towards transformation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned personification, and sort of how he has these almost like mini transformations that the author uses the personification of the grass and whatnot, and the wet eye, and the fly, and all that to again contribute to this sense of transformation. Okay, thank you. Yes, what more can we hear? Or read or see?
Yeah, I really like the rejection of humanity, and then kind of also summing up what the others have said, especially as the author, she identifies not only with this horse, but the brook creasing a field, just like the start that rivers know, how rivers flow and they see through so they see so much, they carry so much, just like the sorrow of a river and what a river or a brook has known. This death, and then it's talking about I want to, my thumbs, my tools, my ability to do this evolved human thing. I'd rather just sacrifice it all for everything that we've done to this planet and just become a horse and run away with the flies and with the brook and with everything. So, thank you.
Yeah. So you're also
In the transition too, that you're talking about too.
yeah. So you're in agreement with the idea of rejecting humanity, and for you the imagery, particularly of the brook creasing a field, and then the maggot, and what was the other one?
It's just that central turn of like this not only is this horse sad, but the water's sad. There's maggots that are thriving in the death. Like this is just ugly. Like I just want to be a horse.
Okay, so yeah, sort of the central part sort of builds the intensity of the transformation that's about to happen. Yeah, okay. Yes, what can we
Just
do?
in terms of structure, it seems to break down into 2 parts, this introduction and then, but it was putting my heart to the horse's mouth, putting my heart to the horses that made me know, like that's setting up what the poem is really going to focus on.
Okay, so we've got a few sections. We've got sort of our introductory, maybe some of those smaller personification moments, but then the middle chunk here sort of does the bulk of the work for the really like impactful setup for moment transformation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, what more can we hear?
So yeah, you made me think of that line that made me know the sorrow of horses. Like, at this point, the author knows the sorrows, and lists a couple, and then while knowing all of the sorrows, still would just absolutely take being a horse over what he is currently. Like knowing the sorrows, I forsake my thumbs. I will take their sorrows and their worries over mine any day. Is kind of what I see that as.
Okay, so you're noticing sort of again, the progression, but the fact that the speaker already knows the horse's sorrows just by putting his heart to the horses. He's willing to take those sorrows on at the cost of humanity. Okay. Thank you. Any other last comments? No? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so in this poem we heard, again, sort of the narrative maybe was not necessarily so straightforward, but we had a lot of powerful things, imagery, we had metaphor mentioned, we had, sort of rhythmic elements like repetition and of maybe, but also the line breaks sort of to shape our sense of pulse and breathing. All of these things were contributing to our sense of the moment of transformation, but even larger things like structure, sort of how the elements of the narrative were broken down into different segments to really sort of pace the turn. So, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this? I'll put up the slide for the bio of the author.
Not a horse.
Not anymore, I guess.
Where does he live?
Bloomington, Indiana.
My birthplace.
Oh, yes. I actually got to study with him while I was in school there, so.
Cool.
He was not a horse then either.
We don't know when the horse phase was.
Does anybody have any questions about any of the artworks that we talked about today or any other final things? Yes?
How did you choose them?
My favorites. I got the chance to do this and I just was like, what would I want to talk about if I was sitting on your side of the stage? So, although I will say the music piece was supposed to be a duet, but my duet partner was sick today, so I hope it sufficed.
It's a different piece, in other words.
Yeah.
Is it a duet with two violas, or?
It was going to be a duet for viola and bassoon. So. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. Yeah, and I'll be available for
All right, thank you everybody so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate